Ponzi scheme, the abyss of greed and a warning for humanity. In the complex labyrinth of the financial world, Ponzi schemes resemble hidden tumors, attracting countless greedy investors into their traps with an alluring exterior. They not only destroy the dreams of wealth for countless individuals and families, but also have profound impacts on the social economic order and true street system. Today, we will delve deeply into the nature, development process, typical cases, and the underlying warning significance of Ponzi schemes, revealing the ugly truth hidden beneath this glamorous facade. Part 1. Origins and definition of the Ponzi scheme. The history of Ponzi schemes can be traced back to the early 20th century, deriving its name from Charles Ponzi, a notorious swindler. Born in Italy and later immigrating to the United States, Ponzi created a sensation in the financial world with his meticulously designed fraudulent scheme. His scam appeared simple yet highly deceptive. He promised investors substantial returns within a short period, claiming these profits would come from a unique investment strategy involving international postal reply coupons. However, this so-called investment strategy was merely a front. He never engaged in any legitimate investment activities. In reality, the profits paid by Ponzi to early investors did not stem from actual earnings but came from funds provided by subsequent investors. This model resembled a massive financial pyramid in theory. As long as new investors kept joining, the cash flow could be sustained. But obviously, this model was unsustainable. Once inflows of new money could no longer meet the return demands of earlier investors, the entire fraud scheme would collapse instantly. The core definition of a Ponzi scheme lies in its robbing Peter to pay Paul operational mechanism. It does not rely on any real asset appreciation or legal commercial activity to generate income, but instead continuously attracts new investors, using their funds to pay returns to earlier ones, thereby creating an illusion of false prosperity. The fatal flaw of such schemes is that they exploit human greed and desire for wealth, enticing investors to blindly pour money into them under the lure of high returns while ignoring the enormous risks lurking within. Part 2. The operational mechanism of a Ponzi scheme. The operation of a Ponzi scheme can be divided into several key stages. Firstly, the mastermind typically designs an investment plan that appears reasonable and highly attractive. They fabricate various false investment projects, such as opportunities in emerging markets, high-return financial products, or mysterious business secrets. These projects are often described in exaggerated terms, promising returns far above the market average. For example, Ponzi claimed a 50% return rate through transactions involving international postal reply coupons, an astonishing figure at the time. Additionally, they use complex financial jargon and fabricated financial statements to obscure the truth, making it difficult for investors to see through the deception. To attract investors, Ponzi schemers spare no effort in false promotion. They extensively advertise their investment plans through various channels: ads, brochures, social media, and emphasize safety and high returns. At the same time, they leverage so-called success stories to entice more investors, claiming that early participants have already earned huge profits. These success stories are usually self-invented or involve puppet investors who have been bought off. Moreover, they host lavish promotional events and invite celebrities to endorse the project, enhancing its credibility and convincing investors that it's a trustworthy opportunity. The key to sustaining a Ponzi scheme lies in maintaining the cash flow. As long as there are continuous new investors, the money chain can hold. Schemers employ various tactics to attract new capital, such as lowering investment thresholds or offering more favorable return conditions. They carefully calculate the inflow and outflow of funds to ensure timely returns for early investors, thus maintaining the credibility of the scheme. However, this model is inherently unsustainable. Over time, inflows of new money gradually decrease while the demand for returns from early investors continues to rise. Once the cash flow breaks, the entire scheme collapses instantly. Investors discover their funds cannot be withdrawn, and the schemers vanish without a trace. Part 3. Analysis of typical cases. Charles Ponzi, the father of the Ponzi scheme. Charles Ponzi's scheme stands as a classic example of a Ponzi scheme. He claimed that huge profits could be made through transactions involving international postal reply coupons, which attracted numerous investors. Within just a few months, he defrauded thousands of investors of millions of dollars. The success of Ponzi's scheme stemmed partly from his meticulous design of fake investment projects and promotional strategies, and partly from exploiting people's enthusiasm for investing in emerging markets and their desire for wealth during that era. However, eventually, his scheme was exposed. When the money chain broke, investors found they couldn't withdraw their funds and reported him to the police en masse. Ponzi was ultimately sentenced to prison, and his scheme became one of the most infamous cases in financial history. Bernard Madoff, the financial world's biggest scam artist. Bernard Madoff was one of the largest Ponzi schemers of the 21st century. The scale and impact of his fraud were staggering. He claimed that a unique investment strategy could yield stable high returns in the stock market, drawing in large numbers of investors, including wealthy individuals, charities, and pension funds. Madoff's ability to sustain his scheme over many years was due partly to his reputation and connections within the financial industry and partly to his skillful crafting of complex financial statements and falsified investment records to cover up the truth. However, the outbreak of the 2008 financial crisis caused Madoff's cash flow to break, exposing his fraud. The losses inflicted by Madoff's scheme on investors were immense. Many lost their life savings entirely, and some charities and pension funds suffered heavy blows. Ultimately, Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in prison, and his name became synonymous with financial fraud. Part 4. Impacts of Ponzi schemes. The impact of Ponzi schemes on investors is devastating. Lured by promises of high returns, investors blindly pour money into these schemes without realizing they've entered a giant trap. When the fraud is exposed, investors find their funds unrecoverable, and their life savings vanish overnight. Many fall into poverty, even resorting to extreme measures. For instance, in Madoff's case, many investors saw their entire savings wiped out, and some even committed suicide unable to bear the blow. Ponzi schemes not only destroy investors' wealth but also shatter their hope and confidence in the future. The impact of Ponzi schemes on the socio-economic order is also profound. They disrupt the normal functioning of financial markets, eroding investor confidence. When a Ponzi scheme is exposed, it often triggers panic and turbulence in the market, leading to instability in the financial sector. Furthermore, such schemes challenge social fairness and justice. They enable greedy schemers to amass vast wealth while causing innocent investors to suffer significant losses, a glaring injustice that can spark public outrage and social unrest. For example, following Madoff's exposure, many investors took to the streets in protest, demanding government reform of the financial regulatory system. The effect of Ponzi schemes on societal trust systems is extremely negative. They exploit people's trust in financial institutions and investment projects, deceiving investors into believing they're participating in credible ventures through false advertising and fraudulent means. However, When the fraud is revealed, investors realize their trust has been betrayed, dealing a severe blow to the social trust system. People begin to doubt the integrity of financial institutions, lose confidence in investment markets, and may even question society's moral values and principles. This crisis of trust not only affects the stability of financial markets, but also threatens social harmony and stability. Part 5. How to identify and prevent Ponzi schemes. Beware of the temptation of high returns. One notable feature of Ponzi schemes is their promise of extraordinarily high returns. Fraudsters exploit people's desire for wealth, claiming they can deliver returns far exceeding market averages. Investors facing such temptations must keep a clear head and recognize that there's no such thing as free money falling from the sky. Any investment claiming to offer unusually high returns requires careful evaluation and investigation. Investors should conduct comprehensive analyses of the legality, feasibility, and risk of investment projects rather than blindly trusting the promoter's claims. Pay attention to the legality of investment projects. When selecting investment projects, investors must focus on their legality. Legitimate investments typically undergo strict regulation and require a series of approval procedures. Investors can check relevant laws, regulations, and information from regulatory bodies to understand the legality of investment projects. If a project lacks proper approvals or involves obvious violations, investors should proceed cautiously to avoid falling into traps. Understand the operation mode of investment projects. When choosing investment projects, investors also need to understand their operating models. A key characteristic of Ponzi schemes is the robbing Peter to pay Paul funding model. By carefully studying the financial statements and fund flows of investment projects, investors can determine whether the operational model is rational. If a project fails to provide clear financial statements or if fund flows are unclear, investors should remain vigilant and avoid blind investments. Seek professional advice. When faced with complex investment projects, investors often struggle to make accurate judgments. In such situations, seeking professional advice is crucial. Investors can consult professional financial advisors, lawyers, or accountants to understand the legality and risks of investment projects. Professionals can help investors make informed decisions through expert analysis and assessment, avoiding the pitfalls of Ponzi schemes. Part 6. The warning significance of Ponzi schemes. The emergence of Ponzi schemes is not only a tumor in the financial market, but also a reflection of human greed and a crisis of trust. It profoundly reminds us that greed is humanity's greatest enemy, and trust forms the foundation of social harmony and stability. When confronted with the temptation of high returns, we must maintain clarity and remember that there's no such thing as free money falling from the sky. Any investment claiming to deliver high returns must undergo thorough evaluation and investigation. At the same time, we should strengthen financial regulation, improve laws and regulations, severely punish financial fraud, and protect investors' rights and interests. Only in this way can we avoid falling into Ponzi scheme traps again, safeguard financial market stability, and maintain social harmony. Part 7. Conclusion. The history of Ponzi schemes is a dark chapter filled with deceit and greed. From Charles Ponzi to Bernard Madoff, these scammers exploited human weaknesses, weaving one seemingly beautiful dream of wealth after another, only to plunge countless investors into despair. Let us learn from history, remain vigilant against the resurgence of Ponzi schemes, and protect our hard-earned wealth and trust. Thank you for listening to this story so patiently. I hope it has brought you some insights and food for thought. If you find it valuable, Don't forget to like and follow us. We will continue to bring you more interesting and in-depth content. Look forward to meeting you again in our next video. Have a wonderful day and see you next time.